In the top stories, Tourism Ministry hosts press conference on the future of cruise tourism. Venezuela's currency losing zeros from prices, and over half of Australia in lockdown as Delta variant spreads. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today's Friday, August 6, 2021. I'm Jason Davis. Nationally, cruise tourism out of Florida will be put on hold for the month of August, according to Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Lindsey Grant. During a press conference on Friday morning, the minister gave details of a court ruling in the U.S. mandating that the Caribbean home porting of vessels ceases. They now have to leave from Florida.
In May, the CDC no-sail order placed a halt on cruising from the United States. Cruise lines, in their best interests, decided to resume cruising from the Caribbean and Caribbean home ports. Governor DeSantis in Florida and the CDC are currently in an ongoing court battle to prevent the CDC from enforcing guidelines that restrict the resumption of cruises home porting in Florida. Caribbean home porting is no longer an option, and Florida is now the main home port for the majority of our cruises.
Minister Grant explained what the ruling means for the Federation.
So the real question is, where are we going? With the Ministry of Health, we have carefully assessed the risk to the destination, and we are unable to receive calls from Florida until we can identify vaccination and testing protocols that allow us to achieve our goal of balancing the economics and balancing public health.
Mr. Grant said the Ministry of Tourism and Health are working to strike a compromise. In other news, an autopsy was performed on the body of 37-year-old Gerald McDonald of Connery on Thursday by resident pathologist Dr. Adrian Nunez. Dr. Nunez concluded that death was due to mechanical asphyxia or lack of oxygen caused by drowning. No foul play is suspected. According to reports, McDonald went out to sea with a group of males to do tankless spearfishing and to dive for whelks off the island of Redonda. Sometime after 7 a.m., McDonald went diving and did not resurface. Reports also indicate that other individuals searched for him and he was discovered several meters away from the fishing vessel in an unresponsive state. They brought him ashore and called the authorities. The police responded, as well as the St. Kitts Nevis Coast Guard, Customs and Excise Department, and the Nevis Air and Seaport Authority. McDonald was pronounced dead by the district medical officer. The winner of the Sugar Mass 50 slogan competition and the winning slogan itself were revealed in a post to the St. Kitts and Nevis National Carnival Facebook page on Friday. The theme this year will be Sugar Mass 50, Fun, Vibe, Energy, and it was penned by Jasmine Warner Weeks. She receives $500 for her winning submission from the director of Carnival, Hazel Webster. The requirement for the slogan competition was to capture the true essence of what Sugar Mass 50 will represent and should be creative, catchy, and no longer than 10 syllables. In the Facebook post, the Carnival Committee reported that they received nearly 200 entries. We now move to news on the regional scene. Venezuela says it will make a 1,000,000-to-1 change in its currency, eliminating 6 zeros from prices in the local currency as hyperinflation continues to plague the troubled South American nation. More in this report.
1,000,000 to 1. Venezuela's central bank is set to eliminate 6 zeros from its local currency. Starting October 1st, the highest cash denomination will be 100 bolivars, equal to 100 million in the current valuation. It's a move economists say is necessary for bookkeeping, but unlikely to address the fundamental problem of hyperinflation.
Tiene sus ventajas, pero son ventajas que no generan beneficios desde el punto de vista estrictamente económico y del bolsillo de los venezolanos si esa decisión no viene acompañada de una serie de medidas que permita justamente controlar la inflación para que de esa manera no se generen nuevas reconversiones.
Venezuelan inflation hit nearly 3,000% in 2020. In 2019, it was over 9,500%. October's revaluation will be the country's third in just over a dozen years. The majority of day-to-day transactions are now conducted in US dollars.
Eso lo que sirve únicamente para el pasaje. Los bolívares ahorita sirven únicamente para lo que es el transporte público, para más nada. El resto todo se mueve con divisas.
Venezuela is now in its 8th year of recession. 65% of its population currently lives below the poverty line. Once an oil-exporting powerhouse, the country's economy has shrunk by 80% in less than a decade. The government of Socialist President Nicolás Maduro blames the collapse on international sanctions led by the U.S., aimed at forcing his ouster.
Corruption scandals, political crises, and a recession kept Brazil from fulfilling many of the promises it made for the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro. But 5 years on, one pledge has been realized, a forest dedicated to athletes. Al Jazeera's Monica Yanikev reports.
5 years ago, this was barren land, and many thought it would remain so. Another broken promise from Rio de Janeiro's Summer Olympic Games, like cleaning up the beautiful and still very polluted Guanabara Bay. But as the world is watching the Olympics in Tokyo, the athletes' forest in Rio de Janeiro is finally blooming and even expanding.
This forest, it's an important legacy from the Olympic Games in Rio, because we have here, right inside of the west part of the city, 13,000 trees inside of a future green corridor that we're starting right now to build for the next 10 years.
It took an uphill battle to fulfill the dream, which began at the 2016 Olympic opening ceremony, with athletes parading seedlings of 207 Brazilian native trees, each one representing a different country. They were taken to a private farm until the necessary preparations could be made to plant them in 2017. But the economic crisis, corruption scandals, and politics got in the way. The seeds of hope would have been buried in the past had it not been for the insistent group of forest engineers who had continued to nurture them despite the lack of public funds.
It took us 3 years, from 2016 to 2019, to turn the athletes' forest into a reality and find a home for the plants.
Each country that participated in the 2016 Olympic Games has a totem in the forest, indicating the species it represents, and its part in this global environmental project.
A year and a half ago, all plants here were this size. Now many of them are more than 3 meters high.
The athletes' forest occupies 80,000 square meters, a space equivalent to 8 football stadiums, and another 20,000 square meters are being cleared to plant more threatened native species.
Soon, we won't have to do much to keep the forest from growing.
He says the trees are already producing seeds, which are being dispersed with the wind and will ripen in the ground. Nature will take care of the rest to maintain this environmental footprint of the Rio Olympics. Monica Yanikev, Al Jazeera, Rio de Janeiro.
Internationally, Australian officials warned Sydney residents on Friday to brace for a surge in COVID-19 cases after the country's largest city logged record infections for the second straight day. More in this Reuters report.
Over half of Australia's population was under a hard lockdown on Friday as the country tries to contain the latest surge in COVID cases. In Sydney, officials are warning residents to brace themselves for another day of record new infections driven by the Delta variant. The city reported 279 locally acquired cases over the past 24 hours, up from the previous high of 259 the day before. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian.
I do want to foreshadow that given this high number of cases, we're likely to see this trend continue for the next few days. So I do want everybody to prepare themselves for higher case numbers in the next few days.
Meanwhile, in the neighbouring state of Victoria, hundreds of anti-lockdown protesters took to the streets of Melbourne on Thursday. That day, the state had entered its 6th lockdown of the pandemic, and residents are growing frustrated. Victoria reported 6 locally acquired COVID-19 cases on Friday, down from 8 a day earlier, with all linked but not in quarantine during their infectious period. Cases have also fallen in Brisbane, the state capital of Queensland, and authorities there say they hope to lift restrictions on Sunday. Australia may have managed to keep its cases relatively low due to these snap lockdowns and strict border controls. But people are growing impatient of the country's sluggish vaccine rollout, with just 21% of people above 16 fully vaccinated.
And now for the weather. Present weather shows fair skies with slight dust haze. Winds are a moderate breeze of 13 miles per hour from an easterly direction. The temperature is 31 degrees Celsius or 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Seas are moderate with waves of 4 to 5 feet. The weather for today will be partly cloudy with a 20% or slight chance of showers. Tonight will be partly cloudy with a 40% or moderate chance of showers. Sunset today will be at 6:41 p.m., sunrise tomorrow at 5:52 a.m. And that brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jason Davis.